Oh, hi there everybody. Sorry about the delay. Next stream will be on Thursday, which will be the 19th of June at 3:30 p.m. UK time. So, let's see. It's good to see you all here. Let's see. Hi to Julia, hi to Maurits, hi to Nadia, hi to Keyword, hi to Oksana, hi to Patricia, hi to Renyard, hi to Vitali. And have I missed anyone? I'm sure that. Hi to Renyard, hi to Maurits, hi to Yuri. So let's get straight down to it. Okay, this was this article about the Hitler diaries and the Sunday Times being deceived by a hoax. Hi Manisco, good morning. So here we go. And the first historian to review, apprise, examine, inquire, weigh, assay the diaries was Professor Hugh Trevor-Roper, also known as Lord Dacre of Glanton. Let's get the ball rolling, definitely Yuri. The first historian to review, apprise, examine, inquire, weigh, assay the diaries was Professor Hugh Trevor-Roper. So we've got examine from Keyword, examine for Maurits, examine for Renyard, examine for Vitali, examine for Nadia. Apprise says Oksana, examine says Julia, examine says Manisco. Okay, so Julia, you don't mean apprise, to look through, definitely. You mean appraise. To apprise is to inform somebody of your opinion. So let me apprise you of what I think. Let me apprise you of the result of my investigation. To have examined was examine, review, assay. Okay, assay is talking about normally the gold or metal content of something. Assay is normally a chemical test to say how much of something is in something, particularly metals, but it could be pharmaceuticals as well. To weigh up, but you weigh up a situation. To inquire, no. Yeah, to inquire is ask questions. Review, it certainly could be. Because let me review this, let me look at it again. But I think examine is a better word, so we're going to start with examine. The first historian to examine. To scrutinise, good word Nadia. In 1947 he had written a book, The Last Days of Hitler, which had brought him a great deal of academic prestige, notoriety, estimation, celebrity, and he was regarded as a leading expert on the Nazi dictator. To peruse, that's a good word Patricia. Let me appraise you of what I think. Yeah, in one year most of my mistakes in English are going to disappear as if they never existed. Prestige says Maurits, prestige says Keyword, prestige says Oksana, prestige says Julia, prestige says type Honk and Julia. I'm going to have to call you Honk. Prestige for Nadia, prestige or cachet. Cachet is a good word as well. Prestige for Manisco. Notoriety is being famous for being bad, for having done something horrible. Academic approval, yes, definitely. Prestige says Julia. Estimation, no. Prestige says Renyard. Academic celebrity. I guess it could be celebrity, but celebrity is about fame, it's about show business. Acknowledgement's a good word as well. I mean, celebrity is talking about being famous, but celebrity is more about being in the press, in the newspapers, whereas prestige is talking about your reputation. Academic prestige works much better. Prestige for games, please. Cachet, being respected or admired, or fame. Prestige, a distinguishing mark, a seal. Okay, he was also an independent director of the Times newspaper, which 2 years earlier had been obtained, accrued, grasped, acquired, along with its sister paper, the Sunday Times, by Rupert Murdoch, the Australian. A distinguishing mark, yeah. Respect, yes. Respect would definitely work, Renyard. He was also an independent director of the Times newspaper, which 2 years earlier had been obtained, accrued, grasped, acquired, along with its sister paper, the Sunday Times. Acquired says keyword, accrued says honk. Taken over or acquired for Vitali, acquired for Oksana, acquired for Nadia, acquired for Julia. Okay, accrued is added on. So, for example, if you don't pay your mortgage, then your mortgage will accrue. Okay, to accrue, to be added on to one another. If my unfinished work is accruing, okay, so it's adding on to what already exists, but this is particularly bills. Yeah. If you don't pay your bill this week, then interest on that bill will also accrue, will be added on. Purchased, yes, Renyard. Acquired, had been obtained. I suppose so, but no, it had been, you had been acquired, yeah, had been obtained. I think you obtain you obtain the food that you need. You obtain something that's easier to get. I think acquired is particularly when there is one of. To accrue interest. Accrue, accumulate. Accrued makes sense. Built up or accumulate. Not learning grammar accrued to my mistakes, yes. The sound is staccato. This is due to my rubbish connection. I'm sorry about that, Patricia. Okay, grasped. To grasp is to grab. To acquire. It had been bought out. Obtain. No, it's acquired. It's definitely acquired. You acquire something. It's something that's not easy to get hold of, whereas you obtain something that is generally easier to get hold of. Lord Dacre was initially doubting, sceptical, hesitating, faithless about the diaries, but flew to Switzerland to view them. Lord Dacre was initially doubting, sceptical, hesitating, faithless. Lord Dacre was initially doubting, sceptical, hesitating, or faithless. Sceptical, says Vitali. Sceptical, says honk. Sceptical, says Julia. Sceptical, says Oksana. Sceptical, says Maurits. Sceptical, says Patricia. Sceptical, says Nadia. So Lord Dacre was initially doubtful, doubtful would sound much better. Sceptical for Nadia and Manisco. Hesitating. Initially hesitating. No. Faithless, having no faith. Sceptical. Smash the like, says Julia. So, sceptical for games, please. Was initially a pinch of salt. He initially took the veracity, he took the authenticity with a pinch of salt. His accrued psychological issue resulted in an acute episode of depression. Yes, that's good. Sceptical, says Renyard. Okay, he initially took their authenticity with a pinch of salt, so sceptical. He was initially sceptical. His opinion began to be rocked, wobbled, biased, swayed when he heard the diary's origin story, and he was told erroneously that chemical tests had found them to be pre-war. Dubitative. He was initially dubitative. It is, let's see, it is okay. It is French, but it is okay. Faithless. But I think faithless too. Faithless, yeah, he was initially faithless, I guess, but it's not a good selection, Manisco. Maurits. Swayed, says Vitali. Swayed, says Honk. Swayed, says Keyword. Swayed, says Julia. He began to be rocked, wobbled, biased, swayed. Okay, bias says that you prefer one side without any good reason. Or maybe you have a good reason for it, that it's owned by your family or something like that, but bias is unfair. Swayed, says Keyword. Swayed, says Julia. Swayed, says Nadia. Swayed, says Patricia. Swayed, says Games. I apologise, Maurits. Swayed or wobbled. His opinion I would say his opinion began to wobble. Rocked is probably stronger, yeah, but he began to be swayed. The origin of the story tipped his doubts. Okay, so he's to persuade, to re-rail. That's an interesting one, Honk. Yeah, to vacillate. His opinion began to vacillate when. Let me try that again. Shift F3. Shift F3. Swayed from El Billy. Welcome, El Billy. He wobbled down the lane on account of his having drunk alcohol. So, what really leaned, slanted, sloped, toppled, tipped the balance, oscillates to go backwards and forwards, but what really leaned, slanted, sloped, toppled, tipped the balance for the historian was seeing the huge volume of material involved. Began to oscillate. Yeah, his opinion began to oscillate, yes. To sway is to move backwards and forwards. The tall tree swayed in the wind, but you can sway somebody's opinion to persuade. I wasn't going to go to the party, but he begged me, and his begging swayed me, made me decide. So persuade, to persuade. Okay, so tipped says Keyword. Tipped says Vitali. She was biased towards her younger child among her several children. Tipped for Oksana. Tipped for Patricia. Tip the balance, says Yuri. Tip, says El Billy. Tip, says Julia. Tip, says Nadia. Tip, says Maurits. Tip, says Lionheart. Okay, to tip the balance. No, this is a collocation. To topple the balance. Topple means to fall over. So you've got the balance and it just falls over. It falls on the floor. The tree toppled. Something, a stack toppled. The mountain, the column toppled. Topple is when something tall falls down. It's not vacillate or slope. No, slope the balance. To slope is to put an angle. What really tipped him over? What tipped the scales? What tipped the balance? Yes. To tip the balance is it's balanced and then something just tips the balance, just makes it a little bit in one direction. Tip the balance is a collocation. The thing that struck Hugh Trevor-Roper most forcefully, and certainly struck me as a non-expert when I saw the original material, was the total sheer plain stark scale of it. Slanted his opinion. If you slant your opinion, I think you become biased. I think it moves your opinion, it slants his opinion. You see, somebody with a slanted opinion is biased. So his upbringing slanted his opinion. Could be. Okay, so the total scale, the sheer scale, the plain scale, the stark scale. Sheer, says Vitali. Sheer, says Oksana. Sheer, says Honk. Sheer, says Maurits. Sheer, says Julia. Sheer, says El Billy. Sheer, says Manisco. Sheer for Nadia. Was the plain scale of it. Okay, I think all of these work. The total scale, the sheer scale, the plain scale, the stark scale. But one of these goes much better. Sheer, says Patricia. Sheer, says Rainyard. Sheer, says Games Please. Sheer is absolute, the absolute scale of it. The sheer scale of it. Plain, the plain scale of it. Sheer is just so much better. Sheer, says Lionheart, welcome. Colours his opinion. That slants his opinion. Yes, that's a good phrase, Patricia. Something colours your opinion, it slants your opinion. The sheer scale is a good collocation. Sheer is one. There is a stark difference between the authentic and the phony. Good, Julia. The enormous range, the sheer range of this archive. It's not just that there are nearly 60 volumes of notebook filled out in Hitler's cursive, longhand, chicken scratch, scribble, hieroglyph, but there are about 300 of his drawings and pictures and personal documents such as his party card. The mere. Okay, mere would be the opposite. Mere is only. Hey, with you everything is colour. Yes, it's true. Filled out in Hitler's cursive, Hitler's longhand, Hitler's chicken scratch, Hitler's scribble, Hitler's hieroglyph. Scribble, says Julia. Cursive, says Oksana. Scribble, says keyword. El Billy, says cursive. Longhand, says Nadia. Scribble, says Games Please. Longhand, says Alex L. Welcome, Alex. Okay. Cursive is only an adjective. Vitali's going to go with longhand. Scribble or cursive for fun. Cursive is only an adjective. Cursive writing, cursive longhand, cursive chicken scratch, cursive scribble, cursive hieroglyph. So Maurice says longhand, Regnard says scribble. Okay, chicken scratch is rather informal. Hieroglyph, normally your hieroglyph is your signature. The doctor put his hieroglyph at the bottom of the prescription, or Egyptian writing, scribbled out. Okay, so I think scribble would work, but if it's scribble you can't really read it and it's rather insulting. Longhand, whoops, is the opposite of shorthand. He writes out all of the words. So longhand is just another word for writing, is handwriting. Chicken scratch is quite funny. It's definitely used, but in Hitler's longhand. Okay, so Hitler's writing of cuneiform. Okay, so I remember there are drawings which he handed, delivered, submitted, provided to art school when he was hoping to get into art school. And there is a painting, an oil painting, and so on. I remember there are drawings which he handed, delivered, submitted, provided to art school. Provided, says Honk. Submitted, says Keyword. Submitted, says Alex. Submitted, says Oksana. Handed in to art school, yes. Handed in. It needs to hand in. To hand to. Let's see, I handed the newspaper to my friend. Handed over. Yes, that would work as well, Maurits. Submitted, says Julia. Submitted, says Yuri. Scribble is more original. Yeah, it's possible as well, P. Submitted, says Regnard. Okay, submitted, says Maurits. He turned in. Yeah, that would work, Honk. Submitted, says Nadia. Submitted, says Games Please. Submitted, says Patricia. Which he submitted. Yeah, submitted. It's a more formal word that he handed in. Delivery is the delivery driver. Am I admitted here? Yes, you are definitely, Yuri. Okay, which he submitted as something to try to get into art school. Now, a counterfeiter, forger, faker, pretender would have to be very good to counterfeit, forge, fake, pretend across that whole range. Forger, says Vitali. Sometimes I scribble as it's more authentic than longhand. So can I say submitted a complaint to... Absolutely. Definitely, Regnard. It's a formal way of saying it. I submitted a complaint. 6.5 to 7 in formality. So, forge, says El Billy. Forger and counterfeit, says Alex. A forger to forge or counterfeit across that whole range. Okay, so my question, what does a counterfeiter do? Forger and counterfeit. What does a counterfeiter normally do? Forger, forge, says Nadia. F says Elbilly. Forger, says Patricia. Counterfeiter and forger. But what's the difference? A faker and a counterfeit. Not as sure on the order. Forge and forger, says Renyard. Counterfeiter pretend, says Games. It's counterfeiting money. Normally a counterfeiter counterfeits banknotes. Forge for the second. Stuff that looks like the original, but it's a counterfeiter is copying something. Yeah? And there's nothing here to copy. And that's why counterfeiter is not very good. A smuggler takes things across international boundaries. A counterfeiter is a traitor. Okay. A faker? No. A pretender? No, a pretender is somebody who pretends to be king or queen. So a forger would have to be very good to... They counterfeit anything that sells. You see, forge is to make something look... Forge is the word for anything that sells. To counterfeit is to make a perfect copy of something. Yeah, you counterfeit documents. That's very good. Hello, Woo. Great to have you. You counterfeit documents, but you forge somebody's signature. Yeah? So it's forger and forge. And I don't like them using both the same word in both spaces, but it's what they did. So, Lord Dacre became convinced they were genuine, even writing an article for the Times guaranteeing, vouching, certifying, assuring, warranting for their authenticity, and declaring that historic events might need to be re-evaluated in light of them. Forge a signature. Yes, you forge your mum's signature to say I'm not going to school. Yes, I agree with you as well. I don't like forging the second, but it's better than counterfeit because it's not a counterfeit. Assuring, says Yuri. Vouching, says Vitali. Assuring, says El Billy. Vouching, says Maurits. Vouching, says Patricia. Vouch for, says Keyword. That for is very important. Vouching, says Julia. Okay, guaranteeing, no for. Certifying, no for. Assuring, no for. Warranting, no for. The only one that takes for is to vouch for. Vouching for. I vouch for. It's almost swearing that this is true. Vouching for, says Games Please. So vouching for. One more and then the last one for today. It's a bit tricky today. Good. Vouching for, says Nadia. As word got out about the Hitler diaries, vouching for, says Renyard. Good. Vouching for, says Nadia. As word got out about the Hitler diaries and a bidding, buying, auction, offering, sale war developed over the serialization rights, with the Sunday Times proprietor Murdoch flying over to Zurich to negotiate a deal in person. Bidding, says Keyword. A bidding war, says Alex. A bidding, says Vitali. Bidding, says Julia. Suffering war. Vouching for the previous one, yes, Lionheart. A bidding war, says Wong. An auction war, says El Billy. That's Rupert Murdoch, yes. Yeah, Rupert Murdoch, the Australian. A bidding war, says Nadia. An auction war, says Patricia. An auction war, says Games Please. Auction can be, says Wong. A bidding war, says Renyard. Okay, what do you do at an auction? You bid. And a bidding war is when various people are bidding strongly against each other. I wouldn't. The collocation is a bidding war. It's not an auction war. I guess auction war might fit. Bidding is what we do at an auction. It's a bit no can do today. So thank you all for coming. It's a bidding war. Yeah, a bidding war, not a buying war. A bidding war. This is a good collocation as well. So let's see. No, it's bidding. It's a bidding war. It's a bidding war. So next stream is on Thursday, which is going to be the 19th of June at 3:30 p.m. UK time. A bidding war. It's okay, P. It's a bidding war. It's a bidding war. So thank you all for coming. It's been great. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Manisco. Thank you, Vitali. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, El Billy. Thank you, Lionheart. Thank you, Games Please. Thank you, Patricia. So let's see. Thank you to Alex and El Billy and Lionheart. Thank you to Games Please and Julia and Keyword. Thank you to Manisco and Maurits and Nadia. Thank you to Patricia and Renyard and Wu. Thank you to Yuri and thank you to Vitali as well. It's been great having you all. So thank you so much, and muck time, MUK. And I hope to see you